I love shoegaze music, and if you're watching this video, chances are you probably do too. One of my top 3 shoegaze albums is Just for a Day by SLOWDIVE. And for a while now, I've been wanting to make a Swiss design poster that really captures the feel of this album. And I also really love the color palette of this album. The orange really draws me in, and on the back here, we've got this really beautiful dark orange color range. So right now, I'm flipping through one of my favorite books, The Designer's Dictionary of Type, and I'm just going through it again to see if I can gather some inspiration for this poster. I want to see if I can get a good idea of a layout and then go through and find some images on Unsplash that I think really captures the feel of this album. I really like this David Bowie poster right here. His face inside of the B is really cool. So maybe an image of a woman twirling in a dress inside of the letter J. I don't know, I might explore a couple of things. Completely unrelated to this video, but gosh, I love that color palette. I also really love stuff like this where it's kind of like a collage of all these different elements together, so I may combine those two concepts, this and the Bowie poster. But for the most part, I'm just going to jump into Illustrator and play, so let's go. Okay, I have a blank canvas in front of me. I've got the book set off to the side so I can flip between the pages, and let's go ahead and get started. So like I said before, I really liked the combination of elements that were on that second page that I showed you, and I'm going to go ahead and lay down this capital J. And I'm also going to extract a color palette from this image. Gosh, these colors in the album cover are making me lament that fall is pretty much over where I live. Okay, so I'm not going to do what I typically do where I limit myself on the amount of colors that I can use from a particular palette. I'm just going to have these colors at my disposal. I'm not going to use all of them, obviously, but I'm just going to use the ones that I think communicate the feel the best. I'm also going to go ahead and take a look at some images here. There are a lot of images in women twirling in a dress, however, I really like this one, and whichever one I use, I'll probably end up making it a nice abstract image. So far, I'm only seeing a few at the top there, and I'm actually kind of surprised by that. Maybe I'll head over to Pexels and see what they have. This one right here is beautiful, and she's got the red hair, and it's got that fall vibe to it. I think I may have found my image here, but I'm just going to keep looking. I also really like this one, and it's obvious that it's like a fall setting right here. It's not particularly orange necessarily, it's very green and orange, it's got a good balance there, but I do love the dress, and I also love the Chuck Taylors. So Pexels seems to have a little bit more of what I'm looking for, so I think I'm actually going to end up going with this image right here, and I'll just go ahead and open it in Photoshop, even though I'm still laying things out in Illustrator. Alright, so let's head back into Illustrator and get our type down. Alright, so for sizing, the album title should be the largest, and then the band name, and then the songs. And what I'll do is I'll start out at a base of 160, and then we'll do 160 divided by 2, which of course gives us 80, and then we'll do 80 divided by 2, which will give us 40. So as you can see, we haven't even gotten these elements onto the poster yet we can already see a hierarchy. I'm going to again break my own rules and just set the kerning to optical, just because Helvetica Neue already does a great job of kerning everything optically. I'm going to copy these and move them over here, just in case I need to grab any text for any reason. And then I'll make these into outlines. I'm going to ungroup all of these right here, so I can group them back together in 3 groups of 3. Okay, so let's start planning for the arrangement of all of these elements that are going to go on the page. So on the Bowie poster that we looked at, I really like how it's set in the bottom left corner, so I might actually do that same thing. Although with the curvature of the J, it might actually be a good idea to anchor it to the right. That way it'll give us plenty of room to work with in the upper left portion of the poster. So I had it all the way to the right and to the bottom, so now I'm going to bring it back up by 1 inch. And then I'll set my anchor point to the bottom right so that I can resize it, and it will keep the reference point at the bottom right of the J. So I just want to get an idea of a visual when I do stuff like this. I want to see what it looks like if you go all the way up to the top and then just kind of bring it down by 1 inch. So I can already tell this is not going to give us a lot of playroom to work with these elements, so I'm just going to bring it down by probably another 2 inches and see how that looks. Okay, 20 inches is good as far as the size of the J goes. However, we can still reduce it down and still have it be the dominant element while giving us plenty of room to arrange all of the other elements. I think 18 inches is good there, so I'm going to go ahead and move some of the other items on. Okay, so the first thing that you're going to see here is the J, obviously. We want to make sure that Just for a Day is not really competing with the J, but that it is the first thing that you read. And just in looking at this, you can tell that this really doesn't work. So I think what we're going to do is just break up the title in multiple lines. Alright, so that's already looking a lot better, and we haven't even finessed it yet. So I'm just going to make a couple of adjustments here. So I'm going to bring up the type right here where this U is, because that's actually where the baseline sits. If you look at the J and the S, those are actually called descenders of the type. So that's going below the baseline. So I'm gonna bring that up to the baseline and then push it down a little bit. 1/4 of an inch is perfect. All right, so I'm happy with the arrangement of the title. So I'm gonna group that together and we're gonna put this all the way in the top left and then move it down by 1 inch. So that way we have a nice even margin around all of our elements. And then SLOWDIVE can go right underneath here and we'll make sure that we align that. Since we went 1/4 of an inch here, I'm gonna push this down by exactly 1 inch. So the spacing between here and here is exactly 1 inch. And then I'm just gonna play around with some arrangement here and I may even change a couple of things. So I'm just gonna speed up this portion of the video. Okay, so the music on this album really feels like it has a lot of motion to it. So I had the idea of kind of staggering the song titles a little bit, and I actually really like how that looks. It almost makes it look like things are falling at random, and I think that that really goes well with the music. Okay, so I'm gonna group all of these together, and I actually really like the general placement of this. I'm just gonna go in and finesse the placement a little bit more. Okay, that's looking good, and I like the balance that we have there. And we'll align this to the bottom, and then we will distribute the spacing between these three right here. All right, now let's go ahead and bring in some color. I'm not gonna color the J because the image is gonna go inside of the J. The album cover itself has a lot of washed out oranges, so I'm gonna try to capture that same feel. So I like a bright orange for the title, and then maybe a dark orange for SLOWDIVE. And I think I'll match up that same dark orange for the release date and the album length. And then maybe I'll do a brighter orange, just kind of bring that one in for that middle section there, and then we'll finish it off with that same tone of orange. And we have this slightly muted white. It's just a little bit of a hue shift. And just for fun, I'm gonna go ahead and duplicate this over here, and I wanna play with an alternate color palette. So maybe a really nice, deep, rich orange there. Man, I just love that. I already love that. And we can still play with some of these lighter oranges. So I'm gonna play around with that a little bit. As much as I love this dark orange right here, I think it's a little bit too light for what we're doing. So I think I'm gonna try something like that. So we've got two options here. All right, so what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna just copy everything except for the background and just bring it into Photoshop, and we'll start playing around with that image. So I've got everything placed here, but I'm gonna bring that J in separately, and I pasted all of it together so I know exactly where all of the elements fall. So I'm gonna place the J in by itself so we can isolate it, and then I'm gonna paste everything else minus the J. And then we'll just delete our original layer. So I'm gonna copy this image, paste it on top of the J layer, and now I'm just gonna make sure that I have this layer highlighted. I'm gonna right click and clip on Create Clipping Mask. So that's gonna mask this image inside of the J. So we wanna bring her to a point where we can enlarge the image right here, and we want the image to fill the entire J, and we don't necessarily have to have her entire face in there. As long as it's nice and abstract, we're okay. Here's where our bounding box is. I actually really like the placement of where her face is. So what I'm gonna do is, while I've got this image selected, I'm gonna go up to Edit, Content Aware Scale, and I'm gonna hold down Shift and drag this way, and just make sure that we fill up that whole J. So what Content Aware Scale does is it scales the image and it's aware of the content that's inside. So it's gonna stretch it a little bit, but it's not gonna stretch our subject. It's gonna stretch the outer edges of our subject. So as you can see right here where my cursor is, we actually have a little bit of space that we can play with right here, so we can move her over a little bit. And then I'll go ahead and put together the same exact image that I just did, but with our other color palette. Okay, so here's our secondary color palette that we put together in Illustrator, and I actually think that this works really well with the image, although the white one works just as well. But I think that if I were getting this printed, I'd probably go with the white background just because it makes those oranges really pop off the paper. And you could easily go in and add some textures here, but I think I'll just leave this exactly how it is. So here is our SLOWDIVE Just for a Day Swiss design poster. Love this album. If you don't know this album, definitely go listen to it. If you're not a shoegaze fan, at least listen to Celia's Dream. That's my favorite SLOWDIVE song. All right, well, thank you so much for joining me for this video today. If you like that poster, please hit like and subscribe at the bottom and click the bell for notifications to be notified of all future content. Thanks a lot for watching and subscribing, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.